Hello, all you ogres out there, and welcome to the first Game Ogre interview. Perhaps the first of many, or the first of few. We'll see. I'm your host, Kit Dotson. Today, I'm playing a recorded Q&A session I had with Zeke Sparks, the lead designer on Cryptic's Neverwinter. We talked about what you can expect from this upcoming MMO. I hope you enjoy. What are the one of the things that I've been looking at, and I'd like to mention that uh, I've been enjoying Neverwinter thoroughly. The idea that we have an MMO property that is reflecting Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition is just brilliant. And I'm wondering, where did you pick up, like, who gives the licensing for that IP, and how closely are you trying to follow it right now?
Oh, well, so first of all, we aren't actually fourth edition.
Oh.
We're not bound by any particular set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, we work with WotC extremely closely. We talk with them, on an almost daily basis. And so everything that we do passes through them. And one of the things that we decided early, and that they believe in and that they backed us, is that what we're doing is we're making a game about Dungeons and Dragons in Forgotten Realms in the Neverwinter area, and that's what is important, not one particular version of the rules. And so that's sort of the approach that we've taken, is not that we are translating rules into an MMO, but that we're translating the experience of Dungeons and Dragons and Forgotten Realms into an MMO. So now with that, we want to make sure that it feels like Dungeons and Dragons for people who have played any edition. We use things that work well in MMOs, and there's a couple of things that don't work particularly well in MMOs, but that we have tried hard to maintain because we think they're important. But I think a lot of the terminology we use reflects fourth edition, not necessarily in rules, but just in terms of how we are explaining things, because that system was. It was done in a way that reflects sort of how MMOs kind of work and communicate. And so a lot of that terminology just worked really well for us, so we kind of leaned on that. But it's not necessarily the rules that we've been trying to replicate, or that we've been restricted by, really.
Right, I mean, I definitely saw some of it in the way that player abilities are triggered, and at least some of the jargon that I thought I saw coming out of 4th edition seemed to be in there. But, of course, some of it, I mean, like, what would be daily powers you do get to use more than once. You just have to fill them up using,
Yep.
hitting people or whatever, which makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. The idea of filling up at least ability points is something that's been introduced to action MMOs via video games already. I'm wondering, what brought you to choose the control scheme, the loadout of powers rather than an action tray? Some sort of simplicity, or
Well, so that was that we did a lot of work, and we tried a bunch of different schemes, and that was one of the most contentious issues. Was how the mouse look, action combat, and how many powers you have access to at any one time, sort of how you behave in combat. We've put a lot of focus on, and tried a bunch of different systems, and really what it boiled down to is we felt that we could deliver the best game that we could if we went with an action style of combat that brings you into what's going on. So it's not a kind of thing where you're sitting back and you're tabbing through targets and you're going through powers rotations. It's about paying attention to the combat that's going on, making it a visceral experience. And when we tried all these different setups that we had done, this is the one that we thought had the best chance of just being a really fun experience. And so that's eventually what we decided to go with.
And that's exactly what I've been getting out of it, actually. And what I like about your response there is it leads directly into a question that I have about end game. Mostly, well, not just quite end game, but more about dungeon and boss battles. In my
Sure.
experience, I only got to see one dungeon and one boss. I ran through with a dev into what I think was the mini-starred Cloaks Tower, which was
Oh yeah.
taken over by orcs.
Yep.
I'm wondering if there's going to be a lot of scripted regions or bosses, like you know how World of Warcraft started going into boss fights that were multiple stages or required different ways of strategies for taking on a boss. Because the one that we fought pretty much was just charge in, swarm them, and kick the crap out of them, and then stay off of particular points in the floor where there were arcs of red.
Yep.
Are you planning more complex scenarios, or is that going to be one of the most common?
Well, so what you saw was the very first one. Out of all of the dungeons that you play, there's one at the end of every adventure zone, and there are a couple on top of that. So there's quite a few dungeons in the game, and you sort of went through the first one. They definitely get harder and more complicated. They are really, really challenging. When you hit end game, we have epic versions of the dungeons where we ratchet up the difficulty even more, add a couple more powers or shticks to some of the bosses, and alter a couple of the spawns in there so that it's even more challenging than it was the first time. And that's, difficulty is one of those things that's kind of hard to gauge, especially when you've been building the game for a long, long time, very close to it. And there's something that we always kind of joke about internally, and this is just to kind of help you know where the target is for the end game content. We always say, oh well, the players are so much better than us. They put so much more time into it. They're so much more familiar with their character. When they get to the end game, we shouldn't be able to beat our end game content, and then there's this nagging suspicion, and we oftentimes pull back from that before launch. But we're pretty committed to it this time. So the end game content that we're going to be putting out is going to be stuff that we actually can't beat internally, and it's going to be a real challenge for players to figure it out. And so, yeah, I think you will see definitely more complicated bosses than what you saw in the Cloak Tower. You'll see some that have a couple different stages to them. Now our end game and our dungeon running is focused on 5-man teams, so we won't have things quite as complicated as the 20-man or even in early days in WoW, the 40-man or raids. You won't see things that are quite on that level of complication, but they will be extremely challenging when you get to the end game for sure.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I like what I'm hearing there. The whole we want to make it challenging but not ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, the next thing that I'm really interested in, as I mentioned, I'm a student anthropologist, and that's the Foundry, which is one of the elements of Star Trek Online that I connected to almost instantly, which is, a way for the community essentially to give content, or at least to express itself in the game itself. And as I understand it, Neverwinter's Foundry is what the Star Trek Online Foundry was initially meant to be, and that this version should modify the other one, but I'm much more interested in what you're doing with the Foundry for Neverwinter itself, especially in vein of community interaction, like not just what tools are being given to people, but how it's going to be delivered to the rest of the community. Do you expect to do spotlights on the best ones that are best rated, or editors' picks, or how do you anticipate mixing it with the forums and other ways that you interact with the consumers of the game?
Yeah, sure. So Foundry is big to us. We love it, and we're super excited about it. I mean, that is, when we talk about the game, we talk about the action combat. We talk about, it's D&D, it's Forgotten Realms, super exciting. It's the most popular setting in D&D. We talk about it. It's totally free. It's free to download. It's free to play. And then we start talking about the Foundry, and I'll tell you, we're thrilled and we're stoked to see where the Foundry goes, because to us, this is we're kind of opening the gates. We're letting players add to a living MMO, and so it's it's a little it's different than things that have come before, where you could always mod games, and the early Neverwinter games had an enormously popular and successful modding community that would develop entire campaign settings and let each other play them. And we're providing a way that you don't actually have to create a mod. It's built right into the game, and it's connected right into the persistent world. So you don't have to go out of your way to play this stuff. It is part and parcel. And how we're integrating it